Hi, everyone. We're going to get things kicked off here. Thanks for coming. You know where you're at. It's the San Francisco PHP meetup group, but this is for the people on the web. Tonight we have David, what the fuck's your last name?
Johnson.
David Johnson, no.
Coallier.
David Coallier. Going to talk to us about extensions and packages. This is going to be a more interesting talk if there's user engagement, so ask questions. Don't just sit there quietly. These are community events, so it involves all that kind of fun stuff. Next month, I scheduled up, we're going to have someone from Open Photo, the Open Photo Project. Basically, it's a way of treating more of your data about stuff you contribute on the web in a open metadata format, so it's easier to port around so that users actually own their data instead of the companies it's sent to. So that should be a pretty interesting talk. It's going to be about more than just photos. It'll be around the data that's with them. So Open Photo, yeah. What else we got coming up? Coming up in a couple months, we're going to have another one of those really big cross-group events over at the Microsoft building. That's going to be about Node.js. So if you have something specific you want to know about that, keep an eye out. That'll be coming very soon. So our sponsors tonight, O'Reilly's we're going to be raffling off a few of their books. We got Engine Yard, who's contributing David's time, and buying drinks after, even better. Woohoo! Hosting tonight and also sponsoring is IGN. So this is us here. We did the pizzas, sodas, all that kind of fun jazz. We're hiring for a director of engineering for our mobile team, some senior video people, and then a whole bunch of non-tech specific people kind of on our video teams and editorial teams. So if you're interested, check it out. It's IGN.com. Does anybody else have any sort of community announcements or looking to hire, be hired? Just call it out from there. It's best.
Thanks. We've started a website for people who are either unemployed or underemployed, and I'd like to get some of your opinions on it. And also, if you have a chance to provide some advice as to what to do as we scale this up. It's a PHP site, and so we're not real deep in the architecture. So SysOp is a big hole for us, and even DevOp actually is a big hole for us. So I'll show you at the end, and I hope you could stick around for it. Thanks.
That's going to hurt. All right, and oh yeah, one more. Stickers are always appreciated. Doesn't matter what company they're from. Bring your stickers. Yeah. You got stickers, yeah. So I need one of your stickers. All right, great. Lastly, before I hand it over here, don't forget to turn off your cell phones and turn down the audio of your laptops. All right.
Because I will make fun of you. So I was expecting a bit more people. So those of you in the back, there's a lot of room in the front. Please move. All right, so that eccentric there is a Ruby guy. His name is Dr. Nick. He's really funny, as you probably noticed already. So, people, please move forward. That's a user group thing. Come on. It's great seats. You can see my beautiful beard. Because PEAR and PECL is fairly straightforward. and we'll be mostly chatting together. Well, I'm not going to start then until people fill the front. All right, let's see. Options. Good. Good to see your faces. Now you get to see mine and make fun of me and everything. So yeah, today I'm gonna talk about PEAR and PECL. What's the difference? Why you should use them? Why you should use which? It's fairly straightforward, and hopefully, you'll get to understand what it is at the end. So me. I usually don't do introductory talks, or slides, but I don't have much content today, so I'm gonna do this. I'm the PEAR president. Sounds very, very official, but all I do really is talk to other communities and see what they need me for, how they can use me, talk to PHP internals, the core developers, see what they do. And usually if you're a PEAR developer and you need to get involved into PEAR, you'll probably end up talking to me at some point. Just chatting, trying to help you, trying to get you more accustomed with PEAR and all the guidelines and all this stuff. So let's get started, I guess. What is PEAR? Who's used PEAR apart from you, Bill? Oh, there you go. That's not too complex. So PEAR is basically a package user-lang code. It's PHP code wrapped in packages. It's not too complex. It's not C code because, well, that's what PECL is. PECL is C and C++ extensions packaged into a little package that it gets installed as a shared extension, whereas PEAR is PHP code that you can modify, you can look at, you can do whatever you want to. So I'll get back into the PECL concept and what it does and whatnot. So PEAR itself, the whole idea of PEAR and writing PHP code is because there's so many PHP developers out there. What we want to do is write reusable code, try to bring a bit of quality in this PHP world. There's a lot of history in PEAR, and it's actually PEAR was actually started in November 1999 by a guy called Stig Bakken. If you make the maths, that's 13 years ago. And PHP is what now? 16, 17? So PEAR is kind of old. And that's a lot of PHP history, a lot of PHP code written by users. So one of the ideas behind PEAR was CPAN, making the CPAN for the PHP world. Who's ever written Perl? Well, that's like 3 people. So CPAN, well, hold on. Can you actually hear me? Do you need me to go like this? Is it better like this, yeah? Like this, no? All right. So CPAN, let's go back then. So the history of PEAR was started in 1999, 13 years ago, by a guy called Stig Bakken, with this idea of making a CPAN for PHP written code instead of Perl code. Well, obviously CPAN has some downsides, but it probably is one of the most successful package repositories on the internet. And personally, it's done a lot of great work for me. A lot of annoyances, but a lot of great work for me. So PEAR is a bunch of things. It's a repository of hundreds of packages that you can reuse your code, or that you can use and that you can reuse, that you can contribute to. But the biggest part of PEAR is the PEAR Installer. And most of you probably actually use the PEAR Installer without even knowing. So yeah, 2 things: a repository of PHP code and an installer. Why, people ask me, why do you need an installer if it's only PHP code? Well, PHP is kind of easy to use, and it's always been copy and paste something, unzip it to your directory, and boom, it works. However, what happens when, someone makes an update, you need to grab the same zip file, unzip it again, then you realize dependencies are broken, or it says fatal error, class not found, because it requires some random class from some random packages. So that's what the PEAR Installer was brought for. It was built to manage dependencies, to help you defining which packages are more important, or which versions of which packages are required for your code to run. It makes it very handy, because all you have to do is define your package.xml file, or in PEAR 2 you can just write PEAR make with your folder, and it finds all the files you need, and it creates the dependencies. And it's pretty cool. And the other thing is, CPAN, it wasn't always about quality. PEAR wasn't either. when I started PEAR about 6 years ago, it was absolute shit. A lot of code in there was really bad because, as I said, the main idea was to write a CPAN, and CPAN has no control. The idea is to allow you to release your code easily without even thinking about it. So, so PEAR kind of, went through this phase where the code was bad. There was still reviews, but nothing quite interesting. And it got a really bad rep. For the past few years, every conference I go to, people are like, PEAR? Man, it's shit code. So what I like to do is actually ask people, if you can actually find a package that's bad now, tell me. Please, I'll fix it myself. I'll remove it from stable status, and I'll fix it, then I'll release it. So, yeah, as this whole CPAN idea of making code easy to deploy and easy to distribute kind of evolved, PEAR also evolved. PEAR evolved into more guidelines, more rules, the PEAR coding standards, which the Zen framework uses, which Symfony kind of used, and now they all have a different version, but they're all based off the PEAR guidelines. So now there's something, this kind of thing with Node.js coming back and having a new wave of developers. Node.js has a nice little package manager called npm, which you can release any package you want, any JavaScript code you want without having to go through any process. It's great, but then again, it creates a CPAN effect where you end up with code of bad quality sometimes, which is annoying. So PEAR over the last few years has been improving a lot in terms of quality, PEAR and peer reviews, and we're kind of known as the Nazis of software development now, because when you submit a package to PEAR, you have to go through the structure of your package, you have to follow the coding standards, you have to follow the naming standards, you have to follow a peer review process, which is kind of cumbersome, but still it makes your code and the code you use much stronger, actually, yeah. So as PEAR, obviously, as I said, we had some issues. People perceive us as the Nazis of the world because we wouldn't release anyone's code or give them any access without actually having decent code. So we came up with PEAR 2. Figured, all right, let's look at the issues our users are having, and let's see how we can actually make this better. So PEAR 2, which is still a PEAR project, PEAR2.php.net. The idea is to make it easier for developers to release code of good quality. So when you want to deploy a new PEAR 2 project, you will get alpha, assuming your project is alpha. So you basically wrote code, you have no test. All you want is a repository somewhere and some central location for people to search for it. Previously in PEAR, as I said, you had to go through peer reviews, you had to go through all the coding standards, the code sniffing, and all this stuff. Whereas now, the idea of PEAR 2 is get your code in a sandbox, and then in order to go beta, you need 80% of your test coverage for your code, and then 100 to go stable. Even though I disagree with 100% code coverage, because I think it doesn't exist. It makes it easier for developers to actually release packages, but also it makes it it gives you a level of confidence when you actually use a package in PEAR 2 now. Because if a package is beta or alpha, you know that it went through a strict community process. People looked at the tests, people look at the structure, and it makes it very easy to interact with different projects. Another thing that's really interesting in PEAR 2 and PHP 5.3 in general is PHAR. PHAR is, I'm going to say this now, hopefully no one's watching online. It's the Jar of PHP, or the EXE of PHP. But it ain't Java, but it's still a PHAR. Uh-huh. Why? Because I say Java. So, who's ever used Java here? All right, so not too many people. So a jar file, imagine it's a compressed format for all your PHP files that you have. So let's just try to make a theoretical version of it. All those files on the left, imagine there are a bunch of PHP files you want to deploy without actually making a package or actually, going through the whole process of peer reviews and all this stuff. So PHAR is all those files packaged into one little thing, one little PHAR file. It's like a jar file. It's like a zip file. So it allows you to distribute your files very easily without actually having to go through all our process just yet. So, yeah, what you do is you package all your files under a PHAR, and then, boom, you can distribute it. You can let people download it, and then just execute it. So imagine this, right? Who's ever done this? Include a file. I say include Helgi here because I stole the previous slide from his deck. So imagine this. That's the old PHP way of doing it. But now with PHAR, you actually have you can include a file from a PHAR file without actually extracting it to your disk, which is kind of strange. It's interesting. First time I saw that, I was working with Greg Beaver on this, or just the conceptual idea of it, and I was like, something seems wrong. Imagine, what about the opcode cache? What about the performance of it? And it turns out APC works with files inside of PHAR as well. It manages to cache them, and it works very well. It's very efficient. So yeah, you can distribute your framework, you can distribute your project using a PHAR file, and then you can point it or include any file that's in there, just like this. Would include the name of the file, and then the name of the PHAR file, then the name of the file. But then it also works with streams and file get contents and all the normal file open or file management functions. So you can do this, file get contents, the file in the PHP or example or anything like that. So you still don't need to extract it to your actual hard drive. You just need to, use the PHAR file. And yeah, this is present since PHP 5.3 by default onwards. So people ask, why would you do this? I'm lazy. I like doing stuff fast. I like when shit gets out there and people can use it, give me feedback before I actually go through the cumbersome process of proposing it to the mailing list, starting a new category, talking to people about it. I'm just saying, try it. Does it work? Does it not work? Let me know. Also, it's a single download. You don't need to download 20 files. You don't need to download a crazy amount of dependencies. You just use it, and it downloads all your files. And you can run multiple versions of PHAR files in parallel as well. So if you have different versions of that, sorry, it was the wrong slide. Nope, not the wrong slide at all. So imagine you have a different version of that file.phar. You can have file1.phar, file2.phar. You can actually test your versions very easily. For instance, Symfony has this little micro framework called Silex, which tries to be like the Sinatra of PHP. So it's very simple routes, simple functions, simple callbacks. And they distribute it as a PHAR. So people don't need to install PEAR, people don't need to install anything. It just works straight off the bat if you have PHP 5.3 onwards. So it makes it very easy to distribute. The other reason, why would you not use it? Because, of course, I might be lazy, but I still don't like doing upgrades. And when you want to do an upgrade with a PHAR file, it's incremental. There's no deltas. You can't just apply a diff. You need to replace the old file, which is fairly annoying, but still, again, as I said, for a proof of concept or a minimum viable product, PHARs are great. So is this all in PEAR 2? No, of course not. There's a bunch of things. PEAR is about distributing your code. The installer can find channels. Channels are a way to distribute your code. For instance, Dig has some custom packages. They will make whatever pair.dig.com that you can find all the packages they distribute. Horde have a lot of packages, and you just do PEAR channel discover the URL of their channels, or one channel, and then it finds all the packages, and then you can just do PEAR install the name of their channel / the name of their package, and it downloads all the dependencies from whichever other channels. Same for PHP unit, for instance. So distributing has always been a big issue, creating your channel, because you need to create a server, create vhosts, and all this shit. And so, in PEAR 2, we realized that was an issue because it was really hard to actually distribute code and create your own channel. And so Brett Bieber created something called Simple Channel Server, which is a package you run. You just point it, and it runs. There's another project called Pyrium, which is by the Symfony guys. And yeah, it allows you to create your channel very easily, put your code, use your code from GitHub even, and there you go. It just runs. You have your own channel. You can distribute whatever code you want without having to go through pair.php.net. It's interesting. There's a lot of stuff. So far as badass, we get that. It's worth looking into, and PHAR actually supports bzip2, zip, gzip. There's a bunch of ways to actually compress your files, so you can use whatever you want. So yeah. A PHAR file? So a FAR file doesn't get extracted locally. The opcode cache goes through the old FAR file. It reads what happens and actually reads from that FAR file on the file system. So it caches everything locally. You can extract if you want to. You can actually run extract to or extract files, whatever. But if you don't want to, you can just in your code include your FAR file and then run directly from there, like a jar. So yeah. But anyways, in this day and age, if you use any framework that exists without an opcode cache, you're probably screwed anyways. Because they're so big, so many files, so many requires, so many stat calls, you need your opcode cache. APC, if you guys need to take notes, APC is a good opcode cache. So yeah, in PEAR there's a bunch of interesting packages. For instance, services dig, services Twitter, all stuff to actually request web services. A few years ago, what was really popular was the MDB2 package or DB packages to allow you to, interact with any type of database you wanted. So MySQL, MSSQL, PostgreSQL, yada yada yada. But that's kind of died in PEAR. Now it's all about doctrine and all those complex ORMs and using PDO directly, which is fine. So yeah, we'll actually get back to PDO in extensions. PDO is not a PECL extension, but it's an extension built into PHP to actually interact with whichever database you're using. So, yeah, services Facebook. You don't want to learn how to use the Facebook API. You can just require services Facebook and start using it. There's documentation. There's a bunch of stuff. Competition. So, if you've been following the old world of packagers in PHP, you've probably noticed Composer. Composer is it's a project by the Symfony guys. It's different. They're trying to adopt a more like a CPAN version or an NPM version where you can actually distribute any code you want, and it's very fancy because it's got a JSON config. Yeah, we can talk about this if you want later. XML for configs versus JSON. I have interesting views on it, and yes, I prefer XML, but that's fine. So yeah, Composer worth looking at. It's very interesting. It does. Yeah, let's not get into the maths of it, but the guy that did it basically looked at PEAR and he said, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like this. I'm going to rewrite something completely new. So now what we're doing is, since they're doing something so simple, yet there's so many issues they will come to, because PEAR still has, 230 developers, about 30 million downloads a month. We've seen a lot of crap. Dependencies are not easy. You have different versions. How do you roll back? How do you use? Which one do you use? So what we're doing is we're talking with the Composer guys to see if we can use their simple management system with a FAR of PEAR, or Pyrus, which is the new PEAR installer, and trying to find a way to work together. But yeah, if you have a chance, look at Composer. It's very interesting. It's got some very good concepts that are new, modern, interesting, and very much less cumbersome. So what about PECL? Who's ever used PECL? That's not too bad. It's all the IGN guys and Mashery. But yeah, PECL is a repository, just like PEAR. It's a repository of packages, but it's all C and C++ code. So it's the same installer you use, PEAR or PECL, different name but the same code base. And what it does is it compiles your code, finds the dependencies, and then it installs it as a shared extension. So it makes it a bit harder to modify, makes it a bit harder to actually interact with. However, I love PECL extensions. For instance, I was looking at that coffee machine earlier. Getting my coffee, and if you haven't used it, it's a great example of PECL packages. Because say you want to interact with it, it's very low level. You need to write C code. You maybe you might need to write actually something that's a bit more complex than PHP code. So you will write it in C, and you will release your coffee machine IGN package, or one package, your coffee machine IGN package. But then there's another coffee machine at Starbucks. They will write another extension written in C that has different lower level APIs called Coffee Machine Starbucks. But what if you're a user, you're a developer, and you're like, I just want to interact with all the coffee machines. So you would write a PEAR package only in PHP code, no need to learn C, that would use those PECL extensions for the coffee machine here, coffee machine in Starbucks, and it would allow you to actually look at it and allow your users and allow yourself as a developer to interact with both machines without actually having to modify your code, just having to modify the factory, not the factory, but the name of the machine you want to use. Not sure if that's the right way to explain it, but PECL is lower level. For instance, one of the things I used to work in was facial recognition. And obviously we wrote the whole thing in C++, and it was very interesting. But then the web developers needed to have a way to interact with this. Like, it's really nice if you write C++ code, but then if no one can use it, there's no point. So we decided to write an extension using our C++ API. The PECL extension would allow the PHP developers to actually interact with the lower level APIs, see the photos we had actually scanned, see the photos we had analyzed, and all this stuff. If you're writing only PHP, it probably would be possible, but it would be really annoying to do, and you probably couldn't interact correctly with the lower level APIs, which is why PEAR is PHP code and PECL is lower level C code, interacting with, APIs. PECL. Another thing you can do with PECL is modify PHP's behavior. For instance, Xdebug. Has anyone used Xdebug? So if you haven't, go do it. Xdebug is probably the best way to debug your applications. If you're still using printar and var dump and die, you probably should die. I still do sometimes. But life. But yeah, Xdebug modifies the way PHP reports errors, modifies the way errors are displayed. It can help you with a stack trace of what's actually happening in your PHP scripts. And Derek's a great contributor to PHP, and he knows it inside out, and it shows how far you can actually take an extension. Suhoshin, the other one, is the security package extension? How'd you call this? How'd you call Suhoshin? It's a security patch, which is as an extension. So you load Suhoshin, it modifies how you can read incoming variables, request variables, things users do, extensions, functions that are available, bunch of things like this. I mean, that's why you want a PECL extension. If you want to modify PHP's behavior, if you want to adapt it to what you need, that's when you use it. So yeah, as I said, operations, it uses lower level APIs. But yeah, it all comes back to PEAR, and it's all about dependencies. Dependencies are probably the biggest thing in PEAR. Personally, I don't really use PEAR anymore for actually writing code and hosting code, because all of my stuff is on GitHub. I have GitHub. If you go back 6-7 years, PEAR was great because we offered developers a bug tracker, we offered them documentation, a place to write doc, a place to host their code. But now we have GitHub. GitHub provides you with a wiki, GitHub provides you with bug trackers, GitHub provides you with, the way to interact with your users. However, one thing GitHub doesn't provide you is dependency management, which is a big fucking hassle. And if you've never ran into a dependency issue, even with the one that comes to mind right now is apt-get and Debian systems. As soon as you run into one, you realize how important good dependency management systems are. And that's all that PEAR is about these days. It's all about making dependencies more solid and making your dependency management easier. So, yeah, PEAR is packaged PHP code, no C, no C++, something to interact with web services, something to interact with what you have in PHP or other extensions. PECL, C, C++ code. So, yeah, I heckled, well, please heckle me, because I heckled LG today. But yeah, this is a user group. It's not a speaker group. No, I'm a speaker. I give presentations all the time. I can speak for either 4 hours, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But it's a user group. I want to see what people want, if people have questions. So please, let's interact now. Question? Internally in PEAR or in the company? At Engineered? All right. That's a bit funny, because let me give you the whole story behind this. We started Orchestra, which is a PHP platform, about a year ago. Then 6 months ago, Engineered acquired us. Engineered was mostly Ruby back then. Now it's PHP and Ruby, whatever the future holds. So obviously we have different ways of doing things. For instance, in Ruby they have gems and bundler, and in PHP we have PEAR. So yeah, for most of what our team does so far is we have different sections. For instance, imagine you have the web app, you have the APIs, you have internal APIs, for instance. What we do is we package, well, every part of the system has a different repository, right? And then those repositories are packaged, and then they're deployed using PEAR. So, yeah, what we do is a list of all the files we have using package.xml file, and then we just deployed those. And it manages all the new dependencies, all the old dependencies. It removes whatever is not required in the systems. And, yeah. So we're actually working on something for our users now, for the PHP users that want to deploy code, is to actually define which extensions they had and which ones they want and which ones they need to use, and allow them to, using a subset of PEAR or PARIS, is to allow them to deploy extensions and dependencies on the system. Well, that depends. You can, as I said, you can have a channel, right? When you want to deploy your PEAR code. Channel you can make public if you want to make open source code, or a channel you can make private if you want to write internal stuff. So there's no actual difference, conceptual difference. One is private, one is public. I've seen a lot of companies like Domain 51 have internal repositories, internal channels and whatnot. So yeah, you just need to start your channel, deploy your code, use it from there. Bill? Well, in theory, if you include your code that hip hop would compile, then it'll be fine. But there's no way to automatically take a PEAR package to make it to C. And actually, there's not much of a performance gain for most PEAR packages, because it's not lower level stuff. It's mostly HTTP requests or things that are dependent on other things. Whereas yeah, see, that's the whole reason why I started using Python, is for NumPy and SciPy, which are great maths libraries and scientific libraries. However, for that exact thing you were saying, for maths, anything that's mathematics intensive, Ian Barber actually started PHP Pac, which is for linear algebra, and yeah, it's an extension, and it's on GitHub now. Started playing with it, started contributing. It's fairly interesting. But yeah, for anything, yeah, here's an example. Pac is a linear algebra library, let's put it this way. All of their code is very optimized at the Fortran and C level. They have APIs if you write C code to use it. However, it's really, really hard in PHP to do this, because you have to go through a proxy and then do a bunch of magic, and it makes your code very slow. So he was complaining, how can I actually do this? I actually told him last week in Benelux, I said, you have to write an extension that uses the LAPAC lower level APIs in C. He was like, well, that's stupid, but that's a good idea. So he did it, and he uses it now. It's great. It actually is much faster, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, the thing is, when you use LAPAC, what you do is you compile it, you make it. You use the config.nice, I think, or config.inc, make.inc, and then what it does is it compiles a shared extension called liblapac.a and liblapac.so, and then you use that from your PHP code using the libraries or the header files it generated. Sorry, the question is, what's the overhead? I don't know yet. I just know it was super slow, and that's why I learned Python. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you'd write an extension that interacts with the library you have in C. Yeah. Well, PHP to C is very, very easy, because PHP is pretty much C. the biggest overhead you'll have is the zvals, which is like the Uber pointers. And I don't know with Java though, to be honest. I couldn't give you an answer. I can look it up and get back to you. But Java, you'd need like Project Zero or something to interact with your Java JVM, which is a bit of a hassle. Nick might actually have an idea there. Nick, JRuby, how does that interact together? Yeah. Yeah. It's fast, yeah? Yeah. Yeah, you should have a look at Project Zero, I think it is. I don't know if it still exists or if it's still underway, but they try to do this. It's IBM, so. Uh, Actively about 35, 50, 60. Depends on the weeks, really, because there's so many packages that you'll have a contributor for something, then this person will leave, then this person will come back, or just send a patch. And since we're on on GitHub now, we've seen a huge uptake again, which is great. Yep. Yep. Hmm. So what he just said is basically Ruby gems, which is just like packages for PHP, has no quality control. It's a bit like Node.js npm. You can just publish your stuff and you don't need any control. It's like CPAN. You don't need any control on it. The question was, do you think it's more important to have quality, and does it impede on the user on a contribution update or uptake? Well, see, that's the thing. As I said, that was started 13 years ago, so we've gone through that phase where every package was not controlled, where any quality or lack thereof could actually get into the PEAR repositories. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, when the likes of Rails came up and code was getting better, people started bitching about PHP or about PEAR most primarily. They're like, "Well, the code is shit in there." Like, yeah, but that's what people wanted. So we started adapting and making the process and the guidelines a lot stricter than they used to be. So yeah, I think it does affect the number of contributions, but I think it's a good thing. Yeah, I see. Yeah. See, well, that's the thing. Composer, for instance, the new Symfony package manager doesn't have any control quality on it. It's basically people will say if it's bad or not. So that's why we're trying to work with them to see if there's a way we could actually use our quality control whilst keeping their flexibility. So maybe somehow getting people to rank stuff, or saying this passes a certain number of tests. There's documentation for it. There's this, there's that, and then give a score or something with it. But yeah. I mean, there's a downside and there's a trade-off for both approaches. Well, my guess is there's going to be a Ruby project that's going to say, well, maybe now it's time to have a more controlled environment or a more controlled place. Yeah. Any other question, please? Yes. You mean the extensions? So there's an extension I maintain called SPL types, and I wanted to better. All right. So there's an extension I maintain called SPL types because I wanted to add strict typing to PHP, and it allows you to create float objects that you can't make strings. It allows you to create int objects that you can't make floats. It will probably never get into PHP. There are some extensions that have been ported to PHP, but for instance, APC, which is used by pretty much everyone, is still not included. And the idea over the last few years has been to try and migrate extensions away from the core to keep the core clean for exactly what you need. So for instance, you can compile PHP with the flag -- disable all, and it removes any other extension that existed in there. And then you can add the extensions you want. I mean, there's a trade-off. Either you could compile PHP and have everything in there, which makes it very easy, but then it can make it very slow. The other option is compile PHP and decide exactly what you want. So this then passes the hand or the ball to the package managers for like Debian or Gentoo or whichever, and then they decide which extensions go in. And you get to bitch at them instead of the actual PHP core for saying, why did you include this? Because PHP kind of has a big market. There's a lot of people using PHP in the world, and whatever decision you make, someone's going to end up bitching about it. And personally, I think it's better if it's clean and if stuff is actually moved out. But yeah, if you write a PECL extension, you could actually move it to the ext folder and do enable your name of your your extension, and then use it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anyone else? I'm gonna start beatboxing otherwise, and it is not good. Yeah, that's our biggest challenge right now. You can add we have a. All right, let's start from the beginning because that's much easier this way. So traditionally, a lot of people write various channels, various packages. They host them various places. If it's not on PEAR.php.net, if it didn't pass the quality control, you can't find them through the PEAR search or going through the PEAR website. However, that's something people have been bitching about. They're like, dude, we want to find all the code that's possible. So what you can do is create your own channel, then submit it to PEAR.php.net. That works. It's a bit annoying because PEAR.php.net looks like it's been made in the 70s. So what we've started seeing now is we have two contributors that are mainly, it might actually be you. Is it? No, it's not you. They wrote this search engine where they actually found all the packages, all the channels everywhere, and actually, I think it's called PEAR Me. Does anyone have internet here? PYRI.me, I think. PYRI.me. Yeah. So if you go to pyri.me, then you can search for packages. That's an idea from some guys in the UK, and they decided to allow people to search for any PEAR packages. So you can find them there. It gives you a description. You can add the channels really easily. Makes it very easy to search through the internet. Anyone else? No? Ah. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm a core contributor sometimes as well. So when something breaks, usually I try to fix it. Well, see, there's been a lot of issues that I'm not going to talk about. But one of the biggest issue was, to me, that to contribute to PHP until about 6 months ago, even a bit now, it's more political than actually technical. You need to start talking to developers that have karma. So you'd start talking to me and say, hey, I have this patch here. Can I send it? Or you talk to someone else and you say, hey, I have this patch. Can I send it? And it's really annoying. It's really hard for new contributors to PHP to actually come in. So there's this guy, Pierre Joy. He started putting this release process RFC together where people can actually contribute RFCs now, where people will vote on them, comment on them, and it makes it much easier for new contributors to actually come in the PHP world and, actually do stuff. And that's where traits come from in PHP 5.4. That's where closures, namespaces, all those stuff, all those cool new features are from the new RFC and release process. But yeah, there's a lot of skeletons in the closet. But that's PHP. We've been doing this for years. Yeah, exactly. It's only humans. But it's fun because that's what I actually like about PHP. It will do something wrong, it will do something right, and then it will adapt. It will try to do better. And I think PHP is doing great. There's still an uptake in the PHP world. There's more and more developers, more and more sites using it, and it's fucking amazing. As Darwin says, survival of the fittest. He's got another quote. He said, "He who doesn't adapt doesn't survive," and I think that's great. And PHP really does adapt, and it survives. It thrives even. Yeah. No one had the hand raised. So here, I have a question for you then, Mister in the back. Your new idea for people without work or less work. Come. Let's talk a little bit. Might as well, right? No one's asking questions, so I'm gonna have a discussion with myself. So what's the new idea?